Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Ritika. She's another amazing young woman who has combined great ophthalmic work with a brilliance in management and bearing a significant role in the ever-evolving CFS chain of hospitals on her slender shoulders. She is the director of the Center of Sight Group of Hospitals with area of specialization in cataract, cornea, and refractive. A major presence in most leading conferences in India and abroad, she has a huge list of awards, very impressive and daunting a list. And I deem it a joy to invite this young, charming girl to detail us on intracorneal ring segments in keratoconus.
Thank you for the kind introduction, especially the slender shoulders. I'll be talking about intracorneal ring segments. This really is a modality that came into being as early as 2001 by Collin, and it was a modality designed to flatten the cornea, which was to be used even in myopia. However, laser refractive procedures took over, and now the ICRS really finds its use in weaker corneas such as keratoconus and post-classic ectasia. Why that is so is that it is an additive technology. That means you're not removing from an already weakened cornea, rather you're supplementing it both in terms of structure by regularizing the structure and therefore optimizing the function in terms of vision. Most commonly used segments are the intact segment and the Ferrara rings. The intact segments are most commonly used by us in our practice. They are implanted in the 7 to 8 mm zone and are hexagonal in cross section. However, the SK segments are ellipsoidal and implanted closer to the pupil in the 6 to 7 mm zone. The Ferrara rings are triangular in cross section and again are closer still to the pupil. Do note that as the segments get thicker, they will flatten more, and as the segments get closer to the pupil, they will flatten more. However, being closer to the pupil may cause visual disturbances, and that needs to be looked into as well. Irrespective of the type of ring segments that you use, they work by the arc shortening model. They are basically spacer devices that you've inserted. Once you're inserting a spacer device, the central zone is going to flatten, and this flattening is going to lead to a correction of the myopia, as well as regularization of the shape. We use this quite commonly in our practice for patients who are intolerant to contact lenses, have central clear corneas, have a thickness of about 450 microns or greater at the proposed incision site. Like I said, these segments are implanted between the 8 to 6 mm zone, and therefore this 450 micron is not the central thickness that you need. We do not like to do this in cases who have very good spectacle corrected visual acuity, such as 6.6 or 6.9, because these patients may stand to lose. And of course, this gives you a way to avoid corneal transplantation, which remains the only option if you cannot rehabilitate these patients visually by other means. How do you plan the intracorneal ring segments? We know that all patients of keratoconus must undergo a good refraction and topography. So this is the basic information that you really need to plan an ICRS. The refraction and the topography lets you know if the cone is central or decentralized. A central cone classically has a higher amount of myopia as compared to cylinder. And more importantly, on the topography in the posterior float, the maximum elevation and the steepening is in the central 3 to 5 mm zone. A central cone requires symmetric segments because you're going to be flattening it uniformly. A decentralized cone needs to be regularized by asymmetric segments, wherein you're using a thicker segment in the area of the cone and a thinner supporting segment, or you may use a single segment. Like I said, the thicker the segment, the more is the flattening. So the greater amount of refractive correction in terms of the refraction spherical equivalent that you're dealing with, or in terms of the higher keratometry that you're dealing with, requires you to go in for a thicker segment. You will plan the segment insertion in a manner that this incision is on the steep axis. The insertion is between 70 to 80% of the stromal thickness, and you would want to leave behind enough in the posterior portion also. And we normally use a nylon suture because suturing is supposed to create an additional coupling effect, and we remove this suture at about 3 weeks to 3 months post-operatively. Segments can be inserted both manually and using the femtosecond laser. We have experience actually only with the femtosecond laser, and the complications of ICRS and its acceptability in fact increase with the use of the femtosecond laser. This is the intralay is being used. We've used the Visumax also. These channels can be created. Whenever a femto laser fires, it creates channels, however, leaves behind some tissue bridges. Mechanically, these can be separated. You see the dissector is being put in vertically first, and then you move it into the channels. Once the initial dissection has been done, the segments are then introduced, and they are wheeled into the tunnel quite easily. You will not get much resistance. You should note that there is at each distal end a small circular opening wherein you can engage with a Sinskey instrument. This is important because you must engage the intact segment and put it at least 1 to 2 mm behind the incision to avoid the future risk of extrusion. Remember, both the segments should ideally not touch each other because touching each other may cause a torque, and that may cause more erosion of the stroma, which is anterior. Let's see how we plan and use these segments in clinical practice. This is a 22-year-old female with a pre-op refraction of -1.5 sphere and -3.75 cylinder. But note that to assess whether you need symmetric or asymmetric, you must transpose the cylinder in a positive connotation. On transposition, you see here that the spherical element is more than the cylindrical element. Such cases do well with symmetric segments. The steep axis is noted, and that is where the incision is placed. 0.35 SK segments are used here. This is the patient post-operatively with an improved topography, improved best corrected visual acuity, and refraction. This is a patient who has a more decentered cone, and the cylindrical element is more. The steep axis is at 36 on topography, but the axis of the refraction is 20 degrees. Because we are looking more at the function in terms of vision, we normally take the refractive axis over the topographic axis if we are sure our refraction is correct. If there is a lot of scissoring and we are not sure of the axis, we may stick to the topographic axis. So here we've taken the refractive axis and put the steep incision there. As in a case of decentered cone, the thicker segment is there in the area of the cone, and there is a thinner segment superiorly. Now we are doing a lot of cases with a single segment also. Again, the patient has a significant improvement both on topography and vision. The previous patient was post cross-linking, which is not the ideal scenario. The ideal scenario is to do cross-linking after intacts or do it together. So we normally do simultaneous intacts or ICRS with cross-linking. There is a synergistic effect of doing a simultaneous procedure in a single sitting, and also it is easier for both the doctor and the patient to do a single procedure. Why that is so is you're freezing a better positioned flattened cone, because putting the ICRS and then cross-linking allows you to first regularize the cone and then you're going to cross-link it. Also, the channels have an area where the riboflavin accumulates and percolates, and the enhanced cross-linking along the channels actually gives a synergistic effect to the effect of the ICRS. This is a patient who underwent simultaneous cross-linking plus intacts. Remember, the intacts has to be done before, followed by the cross-linking procedure. And this is what we do most commonly in our practice, with a significant improvement and fall in astigmatism from 5.4 to 1.1. Post-classic ectasia or iatrogenic ectasia really is a very useful indication for ICRS. These are normally inferior areas of steepening and do very well with a single segment. What is also more important is that post-classic ectasia normally responds less in terms of cross-linking. So an adjunct in terms of ICRS really is a very useful modality to strengthen and stabilize these cases and to redistribute the focal stress that has come into the inferior zone. Once you use the ICRS to redistribute the focal stress, this actually breaks the vicious circle of progression of keratoconus or post-classic ectasia, and possibly has a role in stopping or reducing the progression of keratoconus. This is very relevant because there are a lot of papers out of the United States where cross-linking was not FDA approved, and they were doing simply ICRS, and a lot of these patients did not progress as much. Of course, since we have access to both techniques and technologies now, we normally do ICRS with cross-linking. I just like to end with a patient of mine who had developed post-classic ectasia in her first pregnancy. Pregnancy is a great trigger for ectasia, and there is an upregulation of estrogen receptors up to 30,000 times, enhanced collagenase activity, mediated through prostaglandins. So this patient in her first pregnancy progressed, developed post-classic ectasia, and we cross-linked her. After cross-linking, she went and had another pregnancy, and this is her progressing in her second pregnancy despite having been cross-linked. In fact, a paper published by Hafizi et al. Also has a similar patient which was cross-linked in 2002 and was stable only for 2 years, and despite cross-linking progressed in her second pregnancy. This is the other eye of the same patient with ectasia. This is cross-linking plus intacs done for her. Remember, this is again post first pregnancy, and this is her picture post second pregnancy. So really the case control study of both her eyes shows that ICRS has a significant role in stabilizing as well as regularizing keratoconus, and particularly so in post-classic ectasia. Like all cases, it does come with share of complications. This is a case where we created a false passage and actually perforated the ICRS, and it has entered the anterior chamber. This can simply be removed and the cornea looks almost normal the next day with no loss of BCVA. The ICRS is traditionally made up of PMMA, but now they are now coming up with more flexible segments with acrylic polymers, and it's yet to be shown how well they integrate into the corneal stroma. But there may be a white cell reaction to the ICRS segments. If this reaction is extensive, it can cause melting. So what is important to note is before doing ICRS, try and treat the surface, especially if there's a lot of VKC, optimize the surface, and when you see a white cell reaction, treat it with steroids. If excessive and leading to melt, you'll have to explant the segments. This is a patient who we had to explant. You may need to explant post-infection or melt. This patient had an ICRS in situ for at least a few years, and even after removing the segment, the flattening effect persisted. We, of course, have newer designs such as the BioRing, wherein there are modulations done to both the base and the apex in order to minimize the stromal compression and to create less dead space, and therefore have lesser deposits, be it of lipid, calcium, or white cells. All in all, ICRS is a very useful and predictable option for reducing refractive error and stabilizing patients of keratoconus, and it finds greater use in patients with post-classic ectasia. We offer it simultaneously with cross-linking in most of our patients. We do a simultaneous combined procedure. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ritika.